Hi friends, you're watching the Johnny's channel, and before going into this video I want to warn you that because this case is from China, I will probably mispronounce some names, so I'm sorry for that. If you will enjoy the video, please leave a like at the end and let's begin. It was August 10th, 1981, and it all started at the Jianhua Hotel in Shanghai, China. Li Jiahui, a 28-year-old man and an employee of the Qingdao prosthetic factory, had checked into the hotel on August 8th and had not been seen leaving since. Room service had received multiple complaints about an unusual odor coming from the hotel corridor, which raised suspicions. That day, the smell had intensified, prompting the hotel staff to investigate further. Room 42 was identified as the source, and using a spare key, the hotel staff entered the room. Inside, the worker found Li lying on the bed. When she tried to wake him, there was no response. Disturbingly, upon flipping him over, she discovered he was pale and wasn't breathing. Apparently, Li was dead since the day of checking in the hotel. However, he appeared to be asleep, and the staff, assuming that he was resting, was entering and cleaning the room. Unfortunately, crucial evidence such as footprints and fingerprints had been lost due to the cleaning process. The small room, measuring only 10-12 square meters, made the investigation even more challenging. While the room service actions had degraded much of the evidence, they hadn't wiped away everything. The police managed to obtain 4 incomplete sets of fingerprints from the air conditioning unit. They also took it apart and discovered a few wires wrapped together by black tape, a knife that was 21 centimeters long, and a steel female headband with 2 solid metals fixed at both ends that was possibly somehow used with the wires as the weapon. But at the time, it didn't make much sense how this could have been connected to the murder. During the autopsy, Li's body revealed over a dozen yellowish-brown burn marks, primarily concentrated around his neck and back. The medical examiner determined that these burns resulted from repeated electric shocks to the face, chest, neck, and back. The police contacted Li's family in Qingdao, Shandong province, and they confirmed that he left to Shanghai on August 8th, carrying the bill from the factory and a small bag, some cash, pen, and he also had expensive Swiss-made watch with him. And none of these items were found on the crime scene. While hearing this news, Li's wife, who was pregnant at the time, fainted and later miscarried because of it. The police suspected that the killer was one of the hotel's other guests, particularly those staying in the same section as Li, or maybe the same room. At the time, it was common practice in China for people of working professions to share a hotel room with strangers, as it was much cheaper. Workers who traveled to other cities for temporary work would often stay in hotels this way to minimize their accommodation expenses. Li himself lived in the hotel like that, which is why he shared his room with people he did not know. One guest was more interesting to the police than others. It was a man named Li Yiqing. He had abruptly disappeared from the hotel on August 9th, on the next day after the death of Li Jiahui. According to the staff, Li Yiqing was around 30 years old, of average build, and had no distinctive facial features. While he had written his age as 40 on the hotel registration form, guests noted that he appeared to be considerably younger. At that time in China, citizens were not allowed to freely travel from one province to another. So if somebody would check into a hotel, they needed to provide documents explaining why they do it. They could have been issued by the government or by their employer. Selected officers from Shanghai police were sent to Jilin province to investigate Li Yiqing. However, they discovered that Shuangyang Town Hospital of Traditional Chinese Medicine mentioned in his document did not exist, and no one in Shuangyang Town was named like that. It became evident that the document and identities were forged. The officers returned to Shanghai, where they diligently investigated other guest houses and hotels, but their efforts were in vain. They spent 45 days in the northeastern provinces, tirelessly pursuing leads to ensure they hadn't missed anything. The police took the electric wires found at the crime scene and tested them on live pigs. The shocking results revealed that the wires, carrying 220 volts of electricity, killed the pigs in the matter of seconds. These wires were the murder weapon, and it was obvious that the electrocution was intentional. The 4 fingerprints found on the air conditioning unit became the police's most valuable piece of evidence. Since the Shanghai police had a database of fingerprints from 400,000 convicts, comparing each set manually became a tremendous task. It took 3 months to compare all of them, but ultimately none of the fingerprints matched. However, as the Shanghai police were analyzing their fingerprints, similar crimes were occurring outside of Shanghai. On August 26, in Zhejiang province, Weitang village, Feng Shouwan, a 52-year-old supply and marketing purchaser from an agricultural machinery factory, was staying at a small hotel. He was abruptly awakened by an electric shock and confronted by a man welding an electric wire. Despite his desperation, Feng managed to resist and call for help, causing the attacker to flee. While questioning Feng at the hospital, the police learned that he had been sound asleep when he felt a tingling sensation on his scalp. When he opened his eyes, he saw a man holding an electric wire standing near him. Feng fought this man off and was able to knock off the wire from the attacker's grip. He then shouted at the man, but this unknown man ignored him, picked up the wire, and tried to attack him again. But Feng was able to knock him down with his legs, and this unknown man got scared because he heard hotel staff running through the corridor. He then escaped through the window, climbed over the low fence, and jumped into the river, where he disappeared. Feng received medical examination in the local hospital, and the doctor said that he was in a good health, so the attack didn't damage him too much. It possibly happened because the attacker's device did not work properly, and the electric shock wasn't strong enough. Feng later revealed to the police that the attacker lived in the same hotel as him. He was living during the day and was sleeping at night. This man rarely spoke, and he was always remaining elusive, so the staff and all of the customers of the hotel weren't able to describe him. However, his build and height resembled Li Yiqing from one of the previous attacks, and he also spoke with the same northwestern accent. The only evidence left behind by the killer was the electric wires. Once Shanghai and Zhejiang provincial police became aware of each other's cases, they initiated a joint investigation. At the time, in densely populated China, investigating such case was very difficult. Forensic experts were undertrained, and surveillance cameras were not yet widely installed as they are nowadays. The police had very few leads. On September 11th, in Shangrao, Jiangxi province, in one of the hotels, the body of another person named Yu was found on the bed. He was also staying in the room with several other men. After questioning Yu's relatives, the police found out that he had 200 yuan with him and a watch worth 150 yuan. But these items were not found at the crime scene, and the crime was committed similarly to previous cases. Detectives began to investigate the people who were staying in the same room as Yu. It was discovered that 3 people lived in the room: Yu, a man surnamed Wei, and an individual named Chen Jiwei. On the evening of the murder, according to the information from hotel staff, all 3 of them went to the city and returned to the room at night. The police became interested in Chen Jiwei. He was described as a man in his late 30s, of average build, and he spoke with a northwestern accent. Wei, who was the 3rd person staying in the room, provided a detailed description of Chen Jiwei, which closely matched the description of Li Yiqing. Starting a thorough search of the room, the police discovered a strange note written by Chen. It said, "You and Wei of Shangra, Hotel Room 303, I cannot save you. My life and my family's lives are in their hands." No further evidence was found at the crime scene. This time, the criminal did not leave behind any wires or anything else. The documents that Chen used during check-in at the hotel turned out to be forged. The police sent the letter written by Chen for examination to compare the handwriting with the written texts left at previous crime scenes. But then another attack happened. On September 25th, in the city of Jiujiang, located in Jiangxi province, another murder unfolded, now in the Gonnong Hotel. The identity of the victim remained withheld, but it was disclosed that he served as a buyer for a clothing factory from another city. He was discovered lifeless on his bed, and the cause of death again was electric shocks to the body. His carry-on bag containing 200 yuan in cash and collection of clothing samples had been stolen. The deceased had been sharing his room with an individual by the name of Li Mingchun, who presented himself as a staff member of Donghe Glass Instrument Factory. Li Mingchun also spoke with distinctive northwestern accent. And in this attack again, similarities with previous cases were so obvious that they propelled intensive interprovincial investigation across the vast expanse of China. It was absolutely evident that a serial killer was at work, as the handwriting in the documents left no doubt that it was the work of a single individual. The police formed a special investigation task force, and identikit of the suspected criminal was circulated through the country, posted at gas stations, public places, and hotels. Due to the widespread coverage of the crime in the media, the criminal decided to lay low, fearing being caught. And as the time passed and no new attacks occurred, the case entered the category of unsolved crimes. In October of 1989, the lead investigator, Duanmu Hongyu, retired and left all of the documents in connection to the case in the archive, and he asked to be informed if the case would be reopened. Duanmu Hongyu passed away in 1995, and now another detective, Wang Shuren, who was trying to solve the case after him, also retired and asked for the same thing if this case would be reopened. Year after year, the case remained unsolved, and periodically, imitators emerged in China, committing crimes in a similar manner, presumably drawing inspiration from the knowledge of the unsuccessful investigation. They likely believed that if the original perpetrator had not been caught, they might also get away with their crimes. The first breakthrough in the investigation happened only in the year 2012. At that time, China was in the process of creating a national fingerprint database. Now, to match the fingerprints found at the crime scene with all of the fingerprints ever collected, all they needed to do was to input them into the computerized database, which instantly provided information on any matches. The fingerprints from the Li Jiahui murder case were uploaded into a database for potential matches. Detective Wang Shuren, who was already 77 years old and retired, returned to share his knowledge of the case with the new team of detectives, and he wanted to learn about the results of the fingerprint matches. After entering the fingerprints in the database, the system showed a partial match with a 63-year-old man named Ai Hongguang, who was born in Yingtan, Jiangxi province. Police wanted to know where he lived in 1981. They were able to find out that at the age of 32, he recently discharged from the army and found a job repairing tractors for a small salary of only 70 yuan. And this salary, even by the standards of the 80s in China, was very small. It wasn't enough for him to provide for his family, which consisted of him, his wife, and 3 children. When the police went to Ai Hongguang's home to arrest him, he wasn't there, but they were able to talk with his wife, and the conversation with her only strengthened their suspicions. His wife revealed that in the 80s her husband was often leaving for several days. He told his wife that he did this to buy new tractor parts. And her memory was so good that she was able to remember that in August of 1981 her husband left to Zhejiang province, and he again told her that he was going to buy some parts. So he possibly could have been at the crime scene of the first murder. Ai was arrested at the construction site in Shanghai where he worked. His fingerprints matched those found at the crime scenes. Initially, he wanted to confess only partially, but under the pressure of the evidence, Ai admitted to all the attacks and murders. After returning from the army, he was very dissatisfied with his salary, and during his service he came up with the idea of using wires to carry out the attack. To execute his plan, 3rd of August 1981, he only needed 2 forged documents to check into the hotels. He only grabbed with him insulated wires, a watermelon knife, and a female's headband. The watermelon knife served as a backup weapon in case his device failed. Ai later revealed that he had been inspired by electrofishing techniques, and the knowledge he gained in the army helped him to use improvised objects to carry out what he planned. The first victim, Lee, was targeted because of expensive foreign watch he carried, and after a small talk with him, Ai found out that Lee had also some amount of money with him because he arrived to town to make some purchases. When Lee fell asleep, Ai quietly assembled his device and placed it against the victim's temple several times, then around the neck and body, not being entirely sure if the victim was already dead. After collecting the stolen items, Ai left his device in the air conditioning unit and disappeared. In all the subsequent attacks, he carried out the same plan, using the stolen money to support his family. The only person who managed to fight back and survive was Feng Shouwan. And Ai's wife surprised the investigators once again. It turned out that she kept financial records of the family, preserving them even after 30 years. Each time following the occurrence of another attack, within a day or two, a new entry appeared in the records, indicating an income of 200 yuan or another amount of money. And the money were signed as income from work, because this was the way Ai explained him getting the money. After his arrest, Ai said that he had regretted everything he had done. He experienced nightmares and would scream in his sleep, recalling his victims, and he never was able to tell his wife the reason for those nightmares. The trial began in 2013, and during the proceedings, Ai attempted to retract his confessions, claiming that he was only guilty in attacking Feng Shouwan, and that the other confessions were obtained through torture. However, on video recordings of the interrogations, he appeared calm, and witnesses to the crimes identified him from his younger photographs, in addition to fingerprints and the evidence acquired from his wife. In 2013, Ai Hongguang was sentenced to death, with the possibility of commuting his sentence to life in prison if his behavior for the first 2 years in prison was positive, which eventually happened. So to this day, Ai Hongguang is serving a life sentence in one of the prisons in China. Anyway, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Bye.